Airbnb has changed the way we travel. A cozy home instead of a hotel, a friendly host instead of a receptionist, simple, convenient, and comfortable. But behind those glowing reviews and charming photos, some guests have uncovered something far darker. Because sometimes, what looks like the perfect getaway is actually the beginning of a nightmare. Tonight we'll share 3 disturbing true Airbnb horror stories that will make you think twice before your next booking. For Jacob and Marissa, a quiet weekend away from the noise of the city sounded like the perfect escape. After weeks of stressful work and sleepless nights, they booked a charming lakeside cabin through Airbnb. The listing was almost too good to be true. Rustic wood walls, a fireplace, wide windows overlooking the water. The reviews praised the host for being attentive and kind. It felt safe, inviting, like the kind of place you'd want to lose yourself in for a few days. When they arrived, everything looked exactly as advertised. The air smelled of pine, the water glistened in the evening sun, and the host, a middle-aged man named Eric, greeted them warmly before handing over the keys. He told them he lived a few miles away, but was always just a call away if they needed anything. There was nothing unusual about him, nothing threatening. In fact, he seemed almost overly polite, insisting they enjoy themselves and reminding them to keep the windows unlocked at night for the breeze. It felt like a strange detail, but they brushed it off. The first evening was perfect. They cooked, shared wine, and fell asleep listening to the sound of crickets outside. But by the second night, small details began to unsettle them. When Jacob went to lock the front door before bed, he noticed it was already unlocked. He was certain he had locked it earlier. Marissa laughed it off, suggesting maybe he just forgot. Still, the thought lingered. The next morning, Jacob found one of their suitcases had been moved. It was subtle, just shifted a foot to the left, but enough for him to notice. Marissa swore she hadn't touched it. They dismissed it again, trying not to ruin their weekend with paranoia. But unease was already creeping in. On the third night, the couple woke to a faint clicking sound, like metal tapping against glass. They sat up, listening, hearts pounding. The noise was coming from the corner of the room, near the window. Jacob turned on his phone flashlight and froze. A small red light glowed faintly from behind the curtain. When he pulled it aside, his stomach dropped. Hidden behind the fabric, near the ceiling, was a tiny camera lens pointed directly at their bed. They tore through the cabin, checking every corner, and found 2 more, one inside a vent, another tucked between books on a shelf. Their skin crawled with the realization someone had been watching them the entire time. They wanted to call the police immediately, but Jacob hesitated. The reviews, the location, the host living nearby. What if Eric came back before help arrived? Marissa urged them to leave right then, in the middle of the night. As they scrambled to pack, Jacob's phone buzzed. A message from Eric. It read, "Why are you leaving so soon?" They hadn't told him. They hadn't called anyone. The message sent ice through their veins. Somehow he knew. Somehow. He was watching them even now. They didn't stop to think. They threw their bags into the car and sped off down the narrow dirt road, too terrified to look back. When they finally reached town, Jacob called the police. But when officers went to the property the next morning, the cabin was spotless. No cameras, no sign of surveillance equipment, nothing. The listing was taken down within days. Eric's account vanished, and Jacob and Marissa were left with nothing but their word, and the sickening memory of those glowing red lights in the dark. To this day, They don't know how long they were being watched, or what Eric had seen and recorded. All they know is that sometimes the perfect getaway comes with a price far more terrifying than the nightly rate. For Emily, a solo traveler in her late 20s, the trip was supposed to be an adventure. She had just landed her dream job and wanted to celebrate with a week in a new city. Instead of a hotel, she decided on an Airbnb, a charming one-bedroom apartment in the heart of downtown. The photo showed exposed brick walls, a cozy kitchen, and a balcony overlooking the street. The host, a woman named Claire, had excellent reviews. Guests described her as quirky, attentive, and full of local tips. It seemed safe, even welcoming. Claire greeted Emily herself when she arrived. She was in her 40s, energetic, with an almost too bright smile. She insisted on giving Emily a quick tour of the apartment, pointing out little details. "The building is old," she explained, "so you might hear creaks and knocks at night. Don't worry, it's just the pipes." Her laugh was meant to be reassuring, but something about it felt rehearsed. Before leaving, she added a strange rule. "Don't lock the bedroom door. It jams sometimes. Just keep it open a crack." Emily thought it was odd, but she nodded, not wanting to be rude. The first couple of nights were uneventful. Emily explored the city during the day and returned to the apartment at night, writing in her journal on the balcony. But on the third night, she woke to a faint scraping sound. It was coming from the wall behind her bed. At first, she thought it was the neighbors, but the noise was too deliberate, like something heavy being dragged slowly across the floor. Then silence. She told herself it was nothing and forced herself back to sleep. The next morning, she noticed something else. A section of the living room wall looked different. The paint was newer, fresher, slightly uneven compared to the rest. When she pressed her hand against it, she swore she felt a hollow space behind. A chill went through her. She decided not to mention it to Claire. Not yet. That night, the sounds returned. This time louder. A low thud, followed by soft shuffling, like footsteps. Emily froze in bed, her heart hammering. She reached for her phone and turned on the flashlight, scanning the room. That's when she saw it, a sliver of light, leaking from a seam in the wall, a hidden door. Someone was moving inside. She stayed awake until morning, terrified to move. As soon as the sun rose, she packed her bags. But before she could leave, Claire appeared at the door, smiling too wide. "Checking out early?" she asked, her eyes flicking toward the bedroom. Emily muttered something about a family emergency, trying not to tremble. Claire's smile faltered for just a second before she stepped aside. Emily left, heart racing, but she couldn't resist one last glance as she walked down the hallway. The apartment door was still open, and in the dim light, she saw Claire push the bedroom wall closed. The sound echoed like stone grinding against stone. Later, Emily tried to report the listing to Airbnb, but the page was gone, Claire's profile erased. When she called the local police, they told her there wasn't enough evidence to investigate. Without proof, it was just her word against nothing. Still, Emily couldn't shake the image of that wall, of the hidden space, and of the unsettling thought that maybe she hadn't been the only guest to discover it. To this day, Emily refuses to stay in Airbnbs. And sometimes, when she lies awake at night in a hotel room, she swears she still hears it, that scraping, dragging sound, coming from the walls. For a group of college friends, the plan was simple: one last weekend together before graduation. They pooled their money and booked a spacious suburban Airbnb on the edge of a quiet town. The listing promised 5 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and plenty of space to relax. The host, a man named Douglas, wrote that he wouldn't be around because he was traveling abroad. The house would be entirely theirs. It sounded perfect, almost too perfect for the price. When they arrived, the place was exactly as pictured. Bright, airy, and welcoming. They unpacked, cooked dinner, and laughed late into the night. But as the hours stretched past midnight, a noise broke through their fun. A faint scraping sound, coming from beneath the floor. At first, they thought it was pipes, or maybe an animal. But then came a knock. 3 slow, hollow bangs rising from the basement below. The laughter died. Everyone stared at each other in silence. The basement door was at the end of the hallway, secured with heavy bolts. It struck them as odd now. Why lock it from the outside? The host had never mentioned a basement in the listing. And when one of them messaged Douglas about it, there was no reply. They tried to shake it off, convincing themselves it was nothing. But the unease followed them into their dreams. That night, several of them swore they heard footsteps, pacing beneath the floorboards. The next day, curiosity got the better of them. They decided to check the door. The bolts were old, but not impossible to loosen. With a screwdriver from the garage, they pried them off one by one. The air that drifted up from the crack was damp, musty, and cold. Flashlights in hand, they descended the narrow staircase. What they found at the bottom froze them in place. It wasn't a storage area. It wasn't a laundry room. It was a makeshift living space, a cot, filthy blankets, empty cans of food, and along the far wall, chains bolted into the concrete, long enough to restrain someone but not let them leave. Scratches covered the walls. Some were deep gouges, desperate, human. There were also photographs, old, water-stained Polaroids of people they didn't recognize, their faces blurred or scratched out. As the friends tried to process what they were seeing, a sound made them all whip around. The front door upstairs slamming shut. Heavy footsteps echoed above them. Someone was in the house. Panic erupted. They scrambled up the stairs, abandoning the basement, hearts pounding. In the living room, the lights flickered, and a shadow moved across the hall. They didn't stop to see who it was. Grabbing their keys, they bolted through the side door, sprinting to their car, and tearing out of the driveway. No one dared look back at the house. When they reached safety, they called the police. But by the time authorities searched the property, the basement was empty. The chains, the photographs, the bed, gone. Almost as if nothing had been there at all. The listing vanished from Airbnb the next day. Douglas's account was deleted, his identity never confirmed. To this day, the friends don't know who was in that basement, or who returned that night to claim it. But one thing is certain. The memory of those chains and the sound of footsteps above their heads still haunts them whenever they think of booking another Airbnb. 3 different Airbnbs, 3 different guests, and 3 disturbing reminders that sometimes what you see online isn't what you find when you check in. For Jacob and Marisa, the perfect lakeside retreat became a waking nightmare of hidden cameras. For Emily, a charming city apartment revealed a secret room behind the walls. And for a group of friends, one weekend getaway nearly trapped them in a house that should have never been rented out at all. These stories serve as more than entertainment. They're warnings. Because as convenient as Airbnb may be, the truth is simple. You are stepping into a stranger's space. And you don't always know who or what is waiting on the other side of that key code. So before your next trip, remember these safety tips. Always check reviews carefully, not just the good ones. Look for inconsistencies, vague comments, or missing details. Bring a door wedge or portable lock, and don't ignore your instincts if something feels wrong. If a rule or request seems unusual, like being told not to lock a door or to leave windows open, question it. And most importantly, always make sure someone knows exactly where you're staying. Because while most Airbnb stays end with good memories, these stories remind us that sometimes, behind those charming photos and 5-star reviews, something much darker is hiding in plain sight. So the next time you scroll through those beautiful listings and imagine your perfect getaway, ask yourself, do you really know who's watching you?